welcome back to the Planning Pulse, brought to you by Ikorio. My name is Matt Harvison. I got an interesting and exciting new mini-series for you all today. We're going to be starting out a brand new mini-series all about integrations. What better topic to talk about when we talk about integrations than connection or connectivity with NetSuite? Today, I've brought along two of my integration program leads, Dmitry and Chris. They're going to be talking about the nitty-gritty details that go into the combination of NetSuite and Workday Adaptive Planning, the power of the connection, different connection methodologies, challenges that customers face whenever they connect these two systems, and what that could look like for you. So, Chris, Dmitry, thanks for hopping on with me today. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, if you don't know, if you've never been on a call with Chris before, it's weird for him to be wearing sleeves today. So I'm glad that he's got sleeves on for all of us. Dmitry, up in Alaska, got the beautiful background there for us as well. Really excited for you guys to be on with me today. So let's get into it. Let's talk about why almost 7,000 adaptive customers are out there. And, the majority of them leverage a non-Workday ERP like a NetSuite or an Intact, something like that. We're going to be talking about the most common one that we see, which is NetSuite. I know that, when we have conversations with our customers, there's a lot of different ways that we connect to NetSuite and Workday Adaptive Planning. So maybe, Chris, Dmitry, let's start off by talking about what options are out there for customers, and then maybe we'll get into the pros and cons of each one. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Let's do it.
So a lot of the times we hear web query, we think of, some people ask about native connectors. Why don't you just start by, broadly tell us what options are available, and then let's dig into what some of those options, pros and cons, look like.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's make a next slide and we can go to the next.
Okay. Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah, so I think there's four main methods that we could see that we use. The first one would be the top choice web query. Next one would be the Rasslet. That would be just a scripted JavaScript. We see also file cabinet, which would be the legacy approach. That is, we have a limited support, and of course we have NetSuite out of the box connector. And I guess let's just kind of go one by one and from top to bottom and see why we select one method versus another. Chris, how about you maybe just start with maybe talking about 2FA and kind of why we would do this.
Sure. I mean, so with the different forms of authentication, essentially they're gonna within NetSuite, everything's gonna be generated by, they call them tokens. So you'll have secrets, client and consumer secrets, and what they do is essentially it's a secure method of doing a handshake, is what I like to think of it as. So it's a handshake between Adaptive and NetSuite saying, hi, nice to meet you. And you are allowed to come in, touch our data, pull it, display it in Adaptive how you see fit. Where you see with a web query, so it doesn't leverage the 2FA, but it's actually every bit, if not more, secure. So within the web queries, the way that one works is you create a report in NetSuite, and then it creates its own singular tunnel between Adaptive and NetSuite. That is where the data will transfer through, and it's only going to pass that one set of data, and it's every bit as secure, if not more. With the file cabinets, those reference, you can leverage those within the connector, which then kind of piggybacks off of the connector's 2FA. You can also just connect to those directly.
Thank you. All right, so now let's talk about maybe how large data could be and which one would be the best option. All of those methods can handle large data sets, live data sets, except one. So the file cabinet requires the scheduling piece that is really, not exactly the live, but have a schedule component. So if you made a post of any GL data and you want to pull this data directly right away, the web query, Rasslet, or the NetSuite connector will be your top choice. So if you're talking about the size of the data, the web query can handle data sets quite large, but not the same volume as, let's say, file cabinet or RESTlet. And the reason for this is because of the dynamic filtering. In web query, you cannot have dynamic filtering set so that you can pass any time frame and only pull this time frame. With RESTlet API, or you would be able to do this. Similar with NetSuite connector, you can pass datetime parameter, and that's why you can handle pretty much any volume. All right. So the most probably important topic here is the multi-currency with NetSuite, and it's probably the hardest topic, and that's why web query came around as alternative method, and so all of those methods can handle multi-currency in some form or shape, but the top choice would be the multi-currency for web query. Web query reporting allows you to pull data from NetSuite, consolidated view, top level, and equals to your financial statements. Now, if we're talking about file cabinet, which would be the safe search report, cannot provide the same reporting, especially for the balance sheet. RESTlet is the same story, and so do NetSuite connector. So it is really important to emphasize, if you have a multi-currency setup with Adaptive and NetSuite, pretty much the only choice for balance sheet actuals integration you have is web query reporting. Thank you. All right, so maybe Chris, you want to touch how easy it is to set it up, any of those?
Sure. So as far as ease of use, or just the easeability, the web queries, I like to tell people that work with us that we're kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, right? So the web query, it's a custom integration, it's scripted, but the script has been developed by our team in a way where it is easily deployable to various clients, depending on what your needs are from a granularity standpoint. If we're talking GL data, do you need vendor, do you need customer, PO number, whatever it is you need. If it's available on a trial balance report, it can be pulled in through that method, and it's set up in a way that it's very simple to replicate. The connector, same idea, well, similar idea. The connector, you set up a credential with an adaptive. There's a handful of things that you'll go generate in NetSuite, copy and paste exercise, and then you have access to the data. The RESTlet and the file cabinet, those are scripted, just like the web query is, but the replicability across clients is different there. So each one is a little bit more custom, dependent on the client, dependent on the save search, dependent on the everything that's going on within an individual NetSuite tenant, and that makes it not as easy to replicate, just because there's not so much commonality between each individual NetSuite instance. But ultimately, Adaptive's data agnostic, so we can definitely do it.
All right, thank you so much. Now, if we're talking about stable in terms of like the parts in the data, so the top choices will be all three with yeses and versus the file cabinet no. And the reason for this is because the file cabinet approach gives us CSV file that could be broken by some comma or special character or like new line. So, and that's why this would be probably our least choice to for the use. The output of the RESTlet would be XML, and after web query there's like a HTML type format. So that is definitely our top choice. All right, so I already touched on dynamic filtering, but let's just kind of like go one more time. So again, web query reports will be set usually for the time after a certain time frame. So if we pull GL data, we'll set it to show data, let's say after the December 2024 forward. And once in a while, you can just update the filtering, which is not a big deal, really. So now RESTlet, anytime you can send the 1 month, 2 months, the whole year. So file cabinet, similar, you have to set up dynamic parameters inside the file cabinet safe search report. which again not allow you to send those parameters at a time. With NetSuite connector, any time frame, balance sheet, income statement, you name it. All right. All right, Chris, and if you can handle the last one, please.
Yep, sure. And then one thing I'll add to the dynamic filtering aspect. So where that really comes into play for clients is with maintenance, right? Like as you've been given the solution, you're now off and running, living your life and kind of working on it after implementation. Where does that dynamic filtering come into play? With web query, and we've said it a bunch because it's where most clients land as far as what methodology is going to be best for them. But where the dynamic filtering comes into play there is, maybe once every year, at the end of the year, part of your end of year processes would be to go in and pivot that report back. So it's not dynamic, but it's 30 seconds a year to go in and update it. So you gain a lot of stuff. You gain a lot there, which we're going to cover when we get to the transaction details. But you gain a lot, and the maintenance level that you have is really quite minimal. And as far as some of the stuff you gain, so transaction details, what we mean by that is granularity with the data, memo fields, transaction numbers, types, all these, anything that's available on a trial balance report that you want to report off of, that you want to load as a dimension with an adaptive, that you want to have in the drill down of your transactions. If it's available on a trial balance report, the web query can get it. Whereas the connector, that supports 7 objects and not nearly as many transactional level fields. You can basically pull a class, item, subsidiary, location, and then not a lot else. Whereas with, web queries, the same with restlets and file cabinets, they're a little less dynamic than a web query, I would say, but because they are pulling reports within NetSuite, you do have access to a lot more than through the connector. Vendors, customers, I believe I mentioned it earlier, but anything that's available on a save sort or trial balance can be pulled through the other methods. I would say, and then I guess we'll kind of maybe wrap up a little bit with our clients use web queries 99.9% of the time. And the reasons being because you have a lot of yeses in that little column, and then in some of the no's, the no's are not particularly troublesome or kind of time consuming from a maintenance standpoint. So like the dynamic filtering, that is something that is such a small drop of water in the ocean as far as like the maintenance goes, 30 seconds a year, so that you can now have access to so many different fields, and so you can have nice, clean, multi-currency is not an issue, which can be an issue for almost every other method. That's why we land the way we do. That's why we have kind of developed the solution that we have for it, and why so many of our customers love it.
Yeah, Chris, I think that's a really good point, because that's what I was going to ask. Is it seems like web query is the approach that we hear of most often, right? Multi-currency, transaction level details, and then a live connection to the source system makes web query an easy choice, right? The RESTlet option here for us, the multi-currency, easy to set up, makes it sort of a second place here for us. And then now, I guess, talk to me about file cabinet versus NetSuite connector. When are we expected to use one versus the other? Is it really boiled down to, do we want to bring transaction level details in or not? Or do we want that live connection? Is that only the difference between those two? Or what situation would you see a customer of ours going for file cabinet versus the connector?
So
okay, go ahead, Chris.
So typically when we go with the file cabinet method, we're talking everything that they want would be something that would normally fit into a web query, only the data set is particularly large, right? So if we're talking, millions in really large volume of transactions, but we want to be able to get to that level of granularity that's ultimately useful for our client, that is where we'll land on the file cabinet specifically. The web query does handle a pretty healthy amount of data, so almost all the time, then we're still good there. The connector we use on almost every integration as a lookup aspect. So it gives us the ability to keep data streamlined that we're getting from any of the other methods, and then ultimately use tools within Adaptive to then go and look up IDs to get to names, account codes, things like that.
Gotcha. Okay. Dmitry, is there anything else that you wanted to include there?
Yeah, so I just want to kind of clarify. So RESTlet and File Cabinet, they're both pull and save search reports. So the File Cabinet is the approach how we pull it, right? So we push data to the folder, and from there, from the folder, it goes to the adaptive. And for RESTlet, there is no folder. There is a script that acts as an endpoint, and it pulls the same save search report. Connector can pull everything, but primarily for us, we're using it to pull lookup tables to do metadata for vendors, account, accounts, dimensions, like department, class, and so on. So web query will be the GL data. RESTlet will be used for us for subledger information. You want to pull depreciation schedule, amortization, deferred revenue, and so on. That would be the approach. Thank you.
Gotcha. No, incredibly helpful there too. And I know as we're talking about the different methods of connection, a lot of times with our customers and prospects and people who are considering purchasing Adaptive are always curious about the pro and con or the difficulty in setup for GL balances versus balances and transaction level details. When we think about the change in methodology or the change in effort that takes place by doing transactions rather than just GL balances, can you all talk just briefly about what that setup or configuration looks like, if there's any additional challenges with underlying data related to transactions versus just GL balances, then of course the pros and cons of bringing in transactions versus just GL balances.
You want that one or you want me to take it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So another tick in the box for why we like to use web queries. So from transactional level versus balances within your income statement, the web query development is the same. So whenever we are developing a income statement specifically right now is what I'm talking about. But when we're developing an integration for your income statement, if we are leveraging web query, we're pulling in transactions anyway. When we load into the accounts and adaptives, it's going to do the math to sum them up. So it's effectively just adding an additional loader for transactional level detail. For the balances, that it's dependent on how you're set up in adaptive. So if you're multi-currency, if you're single currency, if it can either be identical, so you would be bringing in transaction level detail and then summing it up when you load it into the balances, for example, if you're single currency. If you're multi-currency, that's where there's a slight difference and a little bit of extra effort when we will bring in the balances for the balance sheet data if for all multi-currency integrations. And then Dmitry, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, spot on. So just to summarize this, transaction details, GL summary, we do one shot, we achieve two goals. So easy to set it up. So if Matt, I think you also mentioned if customer is introducing transaction details, right? Maybe. So again, as long as the data is available, it's not a problem.
Awesome. Well, I know this is just the first episode of a long mini-series of everything that you want to know about integrations inside of Workday Adaptive Planning. I'm going to have my integration program leads, Dmitry and Chris, join us several more times throughout the mini-series. We're going to be talking about Cloud Data Warehouse connectors. We'll be talking about Workday data management and really anything else under the sun related to integration. I believe we've got some HRIS subjects coming up here as well. So Dmitry, Chris, thanks for hopping on with me today. Really excited about kicking off this mini-series, and you will see us again next week. You can plan on it.
Thank you.